Hey, how are you? Let's talk about some things you should do before your counter deal is closed. Build it and they will come. Build it and they will come. Neat idea doesn't always work. So the build it and they will come, it's a premise of the 1989 film Field of Dreams. You might have seen it. It had Kevin Costner, Ray Liotta, James Earl Jones, Amy Madigan, and more. It's a pretty good film. But it's time. Nothing fantastic, but you know what? If you haven't seen it and you got the time, it might be something worth seeing. But the idea of this whole film was simply this. Kevin Costner, who plays the lead role, has this dream, and the dream keeps saying, build it and he will come, build it. And in their case, it's he will come. And he interprets the dream as an instruction to build a baseball field out in his property, which is Iowa cornfields. And so he does this, he follows it. He gets, a lot of support from his family, but a lot of not support from some neighbors and things. It's kind of funny. And then all of a sudden, the ghosts of prior players start to appear. Starts off with shoeless Joe Jackson, and then the other seven Chicago White Sox players who were banned from the game for throwing the 1919 World Series. It's really kind of interesting, but he has this belief. He goes through with it, and these players who basically are dead now come back to life and play baseball on the field. Kind of nice, but if we extrapolate that concept, build it and they will come, and it has been used by a lot of organizations to business and to sales, unfortunately, it just doesn't score a run. I hate to tell you that. I've worked in sales and sales process messaging, sales management for more than 40 years. So I look at sales from a very different perspective. So sales, as I see it, is about adoption and the results or value that the use of the product or service that you're selling delivers. It's not about closing the deal and walking away. Now, obviously, for some, it is. That's all they care about. And there's certain types of products and services. That's really all you're ever going to do. But if you want repeat business and you want to stay in the game for a long time, that's not what it's about. So let me tell you a story. So I was recruited based on my reputation at the time of being able to turn around very large troubled accounts. And I was brought in to work on this company's major clients. In fact, two of the clients represented over 50% of this firm's annual income, and each contributed over six figures a year. So the prospect of losing either of them or not being able to grow them, not being able to upgrade them, would create a very serious blow to this firm's ability to continue its operation. Now, they were both top tier organizations in the healthcare payer space, just if that's of interest to you, if that helps put it in perspective, up to you. So one of them, I'm going to focus on one from what we'll call this one payer. That's what we'll call it. The subject of the story, they had contracted with my firm for a $250,000 software application. Nothing phenomenal, but still. And it's designed to improve the efficiency and operation of the customer facing call center teams. So these are the people who have first interface with the users. So the specification, the design, the contracting, the building, the testing, and the implementation phases, all done, had consumed about 30 months. So representatives of call center management, corporate middle management, senior executives, IT, and more had all participated and opined on the solution. Hey, this is a good thing. This is great. Let's go do this. So after 2.5 years, it was live. Wow. And went thud. It moved, not what they wanted. So I was brought in at that point to take a look at this. And upon investigation, I discovered that in as much as all these aforementioned individuals and groups had signed off on the project, that the people that were responsible for making this work had never fully embraced it. They were the call center agents. They were the worker bees, the feet on the ground, first interface to the customer, however you want to call it. And an interesting side note, and for those of you who understand what I'm saying, will get appreciate this. They were all union members. So translate that. It says, the group that's most impactful to the success of the project, who have to bring this forward, who have to really promote the use of this and make it real, So the group that was important to the justification of six figures, to the organization reaping the rewards of their investment, this group felt that they were never invited to the party. Their input was not sought, was not valued. Bad move. Okay? Bad move. Now you say, well, they shouldn't have been. That's not the point. The point is right now, think of where you are. You just spent 2.5 years, a whole lot of money on this thing, much more than the six figures I quoted you because you got all the internal costs and this thing goes flop right on the floor. So the payer, customer again, right? The payer, they were so frustrated. They didn't understand what's going on. They're ready to write off the investment and abandon the project. And that effectively, though, would have forced them to unhire the firm that I was working with. Now, there's a whole lot of political reasons we could talk about. We're not going to. That's just what the effect would have been. So that would have been another bad move. So I came and looked at this thing, and here's what we decided. We decided the turnaround plan was kind of simple in its design. A lot of work to it, but simple in its design. There's 5 parts to it. The first part, believe it or not, was simply to rename the project. Okay. Second part was to recast the objectives, the goals, the outcomes, however you want to define it, but just recast them. The third was engage the constituents or the call center people in design conversations. The fourth was to invite some members of the call center teams, some representatives of them, into the project management team. And the fifth was then to celebrate the incremental wins. So you define the incremental wins. When you define the project, you define the incremental wins and you celebrate them internal to the team, but also to the entire organization. And we can get into all of the why this is important and why these things work and the justification of doing it this way. But right now, I just want to kind of give you the heads up on this thing. You say, okay, what's going on? What are we getting out of all of this? I mean, that must have cost you a fortune, take a ton of time. Well, really, no, because the result was that the project went from being a failure to become a success. It was completed in about 90 days. Now, here's what's interesting. Very little had to be changed in the actual application, and thus the incremental cost was minor. We weren't changing the whole app. What we were changing was the perspective. So there are 2 lessons I want you to take from this. All right. The first lesson is the building is not the goal. Build it and they will come. Not quite. Closing a deal is not the goal, or it shouldn't be. Point number 2 is that adoption of the product or the process or the outcome is the goal. Because that leads to the desired result where the buyer feels good about their decision and about you. And in this case, the buyer I'm referring to is the payer, right? Because then they promote to their customers. They feel good about that. And that's what really makes things something like this work. So as you work with your buyers, your prospects, however you want to call them, draw them into the solution building and the implementation. Give them the space to have an opinion, to have a perspective, to have some input. You might not need it. You might have done the same implementation 50, 60 times. I don't really know. It depends on your business. But all of a sudden, if they now feel that it's part of them, that it's part of their idea, that they have ownership and they have input into the process, how do you think they're going to feel? So they'll embrace the process because they will have ownership and they'll have a vested interest in its outcome. Hey, I said to do this and they did it. Ooh, I want to make sure that it works. Make sense? So if you've had a similar experience or in one, let me know. Maybe we'll unpack it together and make a case study out of it. You can email me at john.lester@attitudeselling.com. That's john.lester@attitudeselling.com. And in there, you'll also find my calendar link. So if you want to book a call to chat, go ahead and do it. Until the next one, take care. Happy selling.